It was raining. Not the kind of soft drizzle that washes the world in gray silence, but the kind that feels like sorrow, like the sky is mourning too. Black umbrellas clustered around the casket like petals folding inward. People stood quietly, each lost in their own memories. A young woman was being laid to rest, and despite her age, the crowd was larger than anyone expected. But off to the side, just beyond the reach of the canopy, stood a man, soaked to the bone. His black coat clung to him like a shadow, his dark tie loose at the collar. His long hair, streaked with gray, was plastered to his face. A salt and pepper beard framed the sharp lines of a jaw clenched against emotion. It was Keanu Reeves. He stood alone, silent, watching. He wasn't family. He wasn't a friend from college. He hadn't spoken to anyone here. And yet, he was there. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We love seeing how far these stories travel. And if stories like this speak to your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. At Legends and Stories, we don't just tell tales. We honor moments that remind us what it means to be human. Back to the story. As the pastor cleared his throat and began to speak, Keanu's gaze didn't shift from the casket. The name engraved in gold across the smooth white wood: Lena Grace Hartley, 1999 to 2024. Loved, seen, remembered. The words hit him like a wave. He closed his eyes for just a second, but the flood came anyway. Memories long buried. He remembered the street, the moment, the fear in her eyes, and the decision he made that day, without thinking twice. Because years ago, long before this funeral, long before the headlines, Keanu had saved that girl's life, and she had never forgotten it. Now, he was here to say goodbye to the one person who had once called him her guardian in the shadows. The crowd began to shift as the casket was lowered, but Keanu didn't move. He wasn't just attending a funeral. He was keeping a promise made in the quiet corner of a hospital hallway, to a 15-year-old girl who thought no one would ever come back for her. And as the rain fell harder, he whispered a name no one else could hear: Lena. It had been nearly a decade, but Keanu remembered it like it happened yesterday. He had just wrapped filming for a small independent project in downtown Los Angeles. It was late, past midnight. The streets were mostly empty, save for the flickering neon lights of 24-hour diners and the faint hum of passing buses. He had no driver that night, no security. He preferred it that way. The stillness of the city helped him think. He'd stopped to grab a coffee at a tiny gas station on Wilshire when he saw her. A girl, 15, maybe 16. Thin, trembling, hunched into herself like the world had been too loud for too long. She was sitting alone on the curb by the back alley, her knees drawn to her chest, hoodie soaked through, her sneakers untied and falling apart. Her face was hidden, but her arms, bare in the cold, were wrapped around her legs like she was trying to hold herself together. Keanu paused, coffee in hand. Something told him not to keep walking. He took a slow step closer. "Hey," he said gently, keeping his voice low and steady. "You all right?" She flinched at the sound, shrinking further into herself. She didn't look up. Keanu crouched down a few feet away, not too close. He placed the coffee on the ground beside him and said, "You don't have to say anything. I saw you. And you look like you've been waiting for someone to notice." Silence, then a whisper. "Don't call anyone, please." Keanu shook his head. "I'm not here to get you in trouble." Another pause, then, barely audible, "I have nowhere to go." Her voice was cracked, dry, defeated. Keanu could hear the weight behind it, the kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from a long day, but from a long life of feeling forgotten. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then slowly looked up. Her eyes were red, her cheeks streaked with dirt and dried tears. "Lena." And in that single glance, he saw something that stopped him cold. Not just fear, but surrender. Like she'd already made peace with the idea that no one was coming. He took a breath. "Lena, I'm not here to fix everything. I wish I could. But I can get you out of the cold. I can get you a meal, and we can figure out the rest. Together." She didn't believe him. Not at first. But he didn't move. He didn't pressure her. He just sat there in silence, his coffee growing cold between them. Minutes passed. Then she whispered, "I haven't eaten in 2 days." He nodded. "All right, let's start there." They went to a nearby diner, the kind open all night, the kind with cracked booths and waitresses who didn't ask questions. Keanu paid cash. Lena didn't say much. She ate like someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to be full. By the end of the meal, her eyes had softened just enough to hold something close to hope. Keanu handed her a card, his assistant's number, not his own, and said, "If you ever want help, real help, call this. Just say your name." She stared at the card like it was made of gold. He didn't ask why she was out there. He didn't need to. He just said, "You matter, Lena. No matter what brought you here, you matter." She cried then. Not loud, just a single tear sliding down her cheek as she nodded. He drove her to a youth shelter himself, sat with her while she checked in, waited until she was settled. Before he left, she asked the question he hadn't expected. "Why are you doing this?" Keanu smiled gently. "Because someone once helped me, and I never forgot." Lena gripped the blanket they'd given her and whispered, "I won't forget either." And she never did. In the years that followed, Keanu didn't see her often, but every now and then he'd receive a letter. No return address, just updates. Handwritten. Graduated high school. Got accepted into college. I'm volunteering at the shelter now. And the last one, about 6 months ago. I'm becoming a counselor. I want to be the person someone was for me. Keanu kept them all, folded, tucked away in a drawer labeled important. He hadn't heard from her since, and now he knew why. Back at the funeral, the pastor's words finally broke through the fog. She spent her life lifting others from the dark, and though her time was brief, her legacy echoes louder than most who live twice as long. Keanu blinked away the rain, or maybe it was tears, because now he realized the girl he had once helped from the shadows had spent her life pulling others into the light, and no one even knew that it all started with one warm meal and a man who stopped to notice. After that night at the diner, something shifted in Lena. It wasn't immediate, not some magical transformation. She didn't wake up in a warm bed and suddenly feel whole again. But for the first time in what felt like forever, she had something she hadn't known she was missing. A thread of hope. Keanu's quiet kindness had wrapped itself around her heart like a promise. Not a grand one, not a movie script miracle, just a simple human truth. Someone saw her, and that alone was enough to change the direction of her life. Lena stayed at the youth shelter for nearly 2 months. She got her first real pair of shoes. She started going to group therapy sessions, and she never let go of the card Keanu had given her. She kept it in her wallet, even when the corners frayed and the ink began to fade. She told no one how she got it. Because that night wasn't about who he was to the world. It was about who he was to her, the man who didn't walk away. When Lena turned 18, she aged out of the system, but she didn't fall through the cracks. Instead, she started volunteering at the very shelter that had once given her a bed and a bowl of soup. She helped clean rooms, handed out toothbrushes, sat beside girls who reminded her of herself. And she always kept two things in her backpack: a copy of The Little Prince, which she said reminded her to stay soft in a hard world, and a napkin. It wasn't the original napkin Keanu had left her. He hadn't written anything down that night. But years later, she wrote the words herself, in her own handwriting. "You matter. No matter what brought you here, you matter." She taped it to the inside of her locker. College came next, slowly, unevenly, with night shifts at diners and library jobs and tear-stained textbooks. But she made it. She majored in social work, minored in psychology, graduated with honors. Every graduation photo showed her holding a small white card with faded ink. No one asked about it. She never explained. She kept writing to Keanu over the years. She never expected a reply. She didn't need one. The letters weren't for him. They were for her way of staying connected to the root of her healing. A way to honor that moment on the sidewalk where she could have disappeared forever, but didn't. And then, 6 months ago, the letters stopped. Not by choice. Lena had felt the fatigue first, brushed it off. Then came the dizziness, the bruises, the nights she couldn't get out of bed. She thought it was burnout. She'd been working too hard at the shelter, volunteering extra hours, giving too much of herself, just like always. But the doctor said otherwise. Leukemia, aggressive, late stage. She didn't tell many people, didn't want pity. She just kept showing up, to work, to therapy, to the little library where she read to kids on Saturdays. But Keanu? She wrote him one last time. "I don't know if this letter will reach you, but if it does, I just want you to know. I made it. I became the person I always needed. And it started with a plate of eggs and toast, and a man who didn't look away." She didn't sign it with her full name, just Lena, the girl in the alley, in case you forgot. But I know you didn't. Keanu had received that letter a few weeks ago. It had arrived in a plain white envelope, no return address, just his name written carefully in the center. When he read it, he didn't speak for hours. He just stared at it. Because deep down, he had always wondered what became of her. And now, he knew. He knew she had lived the kind of life that most people spend decades chasing. Not fame, not fortune, but purpose. She had built a life out of the kindness she was given, and she had passed it on 100-fold. And now, she was gone. Back at the funeral, the rain hadn't stopped. But neither had the stories. One by one, people stood up and shared what Lena had done for them. A single mother who said Lena showed up with groceries when no one else did. A boy who had been on the edge of foster care until Lena found him a home. A woman who tried to take her life until Lena sat with her for 5 hours straight in an ER hallway, just holding her hand. Story after story. Echo after echo, and all of them traced back to that one night, to that one man, sitting in silence, holding a cup of coffee. After the crowd had mostly cleared, a small girl, no older than 6, approached Keanu at the edge of the cemetery. She held out a small, folded piece of paper. "She wanted you to have this," the girl whispered. "My mom said she wrote it before, you know." Keanu unfolded it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was shaky, faint. "I made it because someone once said I mattered. And now I'm telling you, you did too." That was it. No name, no farewell, just truth. Keanu stood there for a long time, Rain in his hair, wind at his back, hands clenched around that paper like it was a lifeline. And finally, he whispered, "You never owed me anything, Lena. But thank you for remembering." The rain had finally stopped, but the clouds lingered like ghosts overhead. Keanu sat in the back seat of a nondescript car, parked just down the street from Lena's final resting place. The folded note she had written, "You did too," still rested in the pocket over his heart. He hadn't let go of it since the little girl had handed it to him. His fingers kept brushing over the crease, as if he were afraid it would vanish if he stopped holding on. But Lena wasn't gone. Not really. He could feel her in every word that had been spoken at her memorial, in every candle that flickered in the chapel, in every tear that had slipped down the cheeks of people she had lifted, held, healed. She had built something beautiful from brokenness, and Keanu knew he couldn't just go back to normal after this. The next day, he cleared his schedule. No interviews, no press, no meetings. He flew back to Los Angeles under the radar, just as quietly as he had left. But this time, he didn't return home. He returned to the alley, the one where she had been, where he had first seen her, where everything changed. It hadn't changed much. Still dim, still forgotten. But he saw it differently now, not just as a place of pain, but of beginning. And that's when the idea came. He made a call, then another, then 5 more. Within a week, construction crews had arrived. The alley was cleared, cleaned, transformed. He bought the small vacant lot at the end of the block. It had once been a laundromat, then a storage unit. Now it would be something else, something Lena would have loved. A youth center, free therapy, free food, counseling, night shelter, workshops. But most importantly, no questions, no judgments. And in big block letters over the doorway, etched into the brick, "You matter." Below it, in smaller writing, "Lena Grace Hartley, Center for Hope." Word spread fast, not because Keanu gave interviews, he refused to, but because the people whose lives Lena had touched were everywhere. They came, they volunteered, they painted murals and planted flowers and donated books and clothing and stories. One wall was dedicated to handwritten notes, from kids who had walked in lost and left a little more found. A boy named Malik wrote, "This place helped me feel human again. Thank you, Lena." A young woman named Esme, "I stayed here for one night. Changed everything." And Keanu? He was there every Friday. He swept floors. He served coffee. He listened, not as a celebrity, not as a savior, but as a man who remembered. He wore simple clothes, jeans, a faded hoodie, a beanie pulled low over his hair, but he never hid. When someone asked who he was, he smiled and just said, "A friend of Lena's." One Friday evening, he found himself in the reading room. A young girl, maybe 12, sat curled up in a beanbag with a copy of The Little Prince. He paused. That was her favorite, he said. The girl looked up, wide-eyed. "You knew her?" He nodded. The girl smiled. "I want to be like her when I grow up." "You already are," Keanu said softly. He walked outside that night and looked up at the sky. The rain had finally lifted. The stars were visible again. He pulled Lena's last letter from his coat pocket and unfolded it one more time. "I made it because someone once said I mattered. And now I'm telling you, you did too." He read it slowly, like a prayer, and then he whispered into the quiet, "You mattered more than you knew, Lena, and I promise I'll keep reminding the world." The next few months passed in quiet purpose. Keanu returned to work eventually, but not in the same way. The cameras still rolled, the interviews still happened, But behind every red carpet smile and every scene he filmed, there was a part of him still rooted in that youth center, in that alley, in that story. Because Lena wasn't just someone he helped. She had become the definition of why he still believed in the world. Each Friday, without fail, he arrived early, before the doors opened, before the noise and needs of the day rushed in. He would sweep the floors, check the lights, and set out a fresh stack of donated coats by the entrance. On the fourth Friday of April, something unexpected happened. As Keanu stepped inside with a box of donated books, he was greeted by a young man, maybe 22, clean-shaven, thin-framed, with a nervous energy and a folder clutched to his chest. "Hi," the man said, his voice cracking slightly. "Are you Keanu?" Keanu smiled gently. "Depends who's asking." The man laughed, breathless. "My name's Adam. Lena. She saved my life." Keanu's expression shifted, from polite curiosity to silent understanding. "She found me behind a grocery store 3 years ago. I was using. I didn't think I mattered. I still don't know why she stopped, but she did. And she didn't give up on me. Ever." Adam opened the folder, revealing pages of drawings. "I'm an artist now, or trying to be. I didn't know where else to show these, but this place felt right." Keanu flipped through them. They were raw, beautiful. One stopped him cold. A sketch of Lena sitting in a folding chair, notebook in hand, her face mid-laugh. Adam said quietly, "That was from memory. I only saw her smile like that once. It stayed with me." Keanu closed the folder and placed a hand on Adam's shoulder. "Would you hang them here, in the center?" Adam nodded, tears welling. "I'd be honored." That afternoon, they cleared a wall. By nightfall, Lena's wall had begun. A living collage, article notes, photos, a chalkboard for anyone to write how she had changed their life. "You gave me a blanket and a reason to wake up. You told me my story wasn't over. You saw me." Keanu visited the wall every week, sometimes to read, sometimes to add his own note. One week, he simply wrote, "Still carrying your light." More centers were built, quietly, softly, inspired by Lena, funded by kindness, not built to impress, but to protect. And then, almost 2 years after the funeral, Keanu received a letter. This one arrived not by post, but by hand, delivered by a woman with Lena's same kind, knowing eyes. "She was my sister," the woman said. Keanu took the letter with reverence. Inside, Lena's handwriting once more. "If you're reading this, it means the world kept going, and somehow, so did the light. I hope you're still reminding people they matter. I hope you never stop showing up. And I hope, most of all, that you forgive yourself. Not just for what you couldn't fix, but for all the pain you still carry. Because I forgave the world. And I loved it anyway. Tell them I was okay. Tell them I knew I mattered. Because you told me. Lena." Keanu folded the letter. And for the first time in a long time, he let the tears fall freely. The woman reached into her bag. "She wanted you to have this." It was Lena's copy of The Little Prince. Inside the front cover, in her handwriting, "To Keanu, for seeing stars where others only saw shadows. L." He placed the book on the highest shelf at the youth center, behind protective glass, with one sign beside it. "Read this when you feel like you don't belong." It was her favorite. Years passed, but the story never dimmed. The Lena Grace Hartley Centers for Hope existed now in 12 cities. In each one, a mural of a girl holding a plate of eggs and toast faced the entrance. And in each one, a copy of that napkin hung framed in the front lobby. You matter. No matter what brought you here, you matter. And once a year, on the anniversary of that rainy day, Keanu returned to the original center. He said nothing, but everyone knew. He would sit in the back corner, order black coffee, and just be a quiet guardian of a story, of a promise, of a girl who changed the world simply by surviving long enough to love it back. And every time someone asked him why he still came, he would simply answer, "Because she never forgot me, and I never will forget her."